made me some really, really good drinks. So he and I became friends through that process. And I asked if he would come and do a little class for us just on how to make something special out of everybody's favorite spirit. And he said he'd be happy to. So I'll hand it over to spirit professional and bartender Ben Ernst to take us through how to make a couple cool cocktails with Aquavit.
Well, well, thank you for that very kind introduction there, Megan, and also Seth as well. Megan, the feeling is mutual in this end. The weight of my heart is having openness to let me just try something weird on you. So with that said, let's get a little bit weird, but not too weird, because at least Aquavit is a little bit more familiar to most of you. For those of you who maybe are less familiar with Aquavit, it's a very classic Scandinavian Norwegian spirit that is, it is sort of the cousin to a couple other different spirits around the world. The Dutch have Genever, which is very similar style. It's basically just, high proof alcohol that is infused with different flavorings. Like in the case of Aquavit, it's with caraway and aniseed and a little bit of citrus, often, sometimes dill. There's a great distillery in Ballard that sadly closed a few years ago that made just a classic, like a straightforward dill Aquavit that was super tasty and really good, almost as a margarita. So, rest in peace to that. I think now it's the Skull Restaurant and Beer Hall is actually in that same building. So at least they've kept that tradition going. But without further ado, I was going to highlight a local brand, Stolthalet. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But as I understand it, it is translated just as pride. So pride in our local heritage and also in the heritage of Norwegians. Megan told me to give you a little bit of fair warning. I am not Norwegian. I am Irish and slightly German. So I hope you can forgive me on that.
I believe I told you to hide that, but.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah,
I appreciate the honesty.
I know if you're drinking with me, I got to be honest. So I wanted to start this off by taking the Aquavit on sort of a tour of a couple of cocktails that are very classic, that are used normally with different spirits, but to show that it can be quite versatile. You can use it in a lot of different things, and you don't just have to drink it straight, even though it's quite nice on its own. So I wanted to start with a classic cocktail called an old fashioned. I'm sure, if you've been to a bar, you've probably seen that on a menu. You might have had one, you might have had many, I'm not sure. But an old fashioned traditionally is used, it was made with usually a bourbon whiskey, sometimes made with cognac, but really any spirit is something that is an old fashioned. An old fashioned is just a very simplistic drink that is, there's no fluff in there. There's nothing else to hide behind. If you make it well, it's going to taste great. If you don't make it well, you still have some alcohol at least, so you're going to feel okay in that front. Having said that, we mentioned on the list there's sort of a sugar syrup, a simple syrup. So if everyone has that or some form of sugar or some sort of sweetener, I've got mine right here. Just grab that near, and then if you have some sort of mixing glass, or if you have a glass that you're going to be drinking it out of, I have this little pretty rocks glass here. You can absolutely mix everything in the glass, or you can mix it in something else and then pour it into the glass, whichever feels more comfortable for you. And Megan, if you see any hands or if anyone has questions, feel free to stop me. I can definitely jump in and troubleshoot, so to speak. So in this case, bartenders always like to start with the smallest amounts and the cheapest amounts first. And this is something that you can totally use as a hint at home, because if you make a mistake, if you grab the wrong thing, pour in the wrong amount, then you're not pouring out your cherished Aquavit or whiskey or whatever it is that you're using. So in this case, I'm going to use just a small amount of sugar, just a little bit of sweetener, basically to help bring out some of the other flavors in here. So if anyone has some sort of means of measuring, I'm doing 1/4 ounce of sweetener in this. If you don't have that, like if you just have like a little container like this, just zhuzh it in there, just like a little bit, just a little tiny bit, think of a dash if you're baking along those lines. Or if you are fancy enough to have a bar spoon like I do here, you can also use that, or like a teaspoon or just a normal spoon. Use like maybe half of that amount. So I'm gonna try to keep this fairly slow because I know I'm able to go at my own pace, but there's quite a few of you. So let me know if I'm going too fast. And then the next ingredient of an old fashioned is bitters. For those of you who are not maybe familiar with bitters, or even if you are, but you're not really sure what they are, the easiest way to describe it is, if you have this specific style, I'll start with that. Angostura bitters, they're quite iconic. They've really been around for over 100 years. They all have this iconic yellow bottle and this intentionally oversized label. Fun fact, they've been labeled a food ingredient, even though they have 44% alcohol. Basically, the idea is that these are a highly concentrated flavored alcohol, almost like vanilla extract, in the same concept that vanilla extract is alcohol for the most part, but you wouldn't want to drink vanilla extract because it's just going to overwhelm you. Same concept with these. However, in addition to vanilla, there are a lot of great baking spices, a lot of things that are really nice sort of winter warming spices like cloves and cinnamon, and also like anise that would be otherwise in aquavit. So what this does is it adds just a lot of character to your drink in very small amounts. Because it's so concentrated, it actually adds a bit of tannin like you would with red wine. So it adds a little bit of texture to your drink. And just that concentrated flavoring really opens up and plays really well with, say, whiskey or aquavit in this case. So you might notice it has sort of a hot sauce bottle cap. And if you've ever tried to pour hot sauce slowly and you've poured it on yourself, that's pretty much what happens. So you have to be just not afraid. You can watch what I'm doing first if you want. Just boom, 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 completely upended into the cup. And I can't really show you because otherwise I'll pour it over my keyboard, but I assure you that it's in there. If you are afraid of pouring too much or too little, you could even pour it into a smaller glass and then pour that into your overall mixing cup.
What was the amount?
Sorry about that. So about 3 dashes. Just 3 shakes of it basically. If you get 2, if you get 4, you're not going to ruin your drink either way. You might have a little bit more spice to it if you have 4, and if you have 2, it might be a little bit less. They're fairly forgiving in that way. Yes, Joanne.
Yeah, I'm not clear exactly what is bitters. You mentioned it has some vanilla in it and spices.
Yeah. So a good way to give it a sort of an amalgam is almost like a tea. If you've ever had black tea and you've forgotten it on the counter or something like that, and you've let it steep for a very long time, and you've tasted it and it's a very intense flavor, it dries your mouth out almost. It is a very concentrated flavoring essentially. And instead of with tea, you have hot water. In this case, alcohol is soluble. So it extracts these flavors out and so it gives it a very intense flavoring, which is why you only add small amounts, because then once it's mixed in with, the 2 ounces of aquavit that we add in there, and then there'll be water involved from adding ice and diluting it a little bit, that it sort of spreads itself out a little bit more and it gives itself a little bit more room and it's less intense.
So what kind of spices are in bitters?
Well, the fun part about bitters is that, these days there's pretty much every kind of flavoring under the sun. I have peach bitters, mint bitters, allspice bitters. I have orange bitters. In this case, with these Angostura bitters, there is something like 40 different ingredients in here. Some of them are very esoteric, like various barks and roots, things that you wouldn't be able to taste on their own, but will add this level of complexity and layers of flavor basically that are there. And they've actually been able to keep the recipe for this brand secret for well over 100 years, despite constant lawsuits trying to ascertain what's inside them. So that's another long story that is kind of fun, but you're not here for a legal story. Hopefully that answered your question a little bit more. There are quite a few, people who still like it's. I know that wasn't fully exact, describing what bitters are, and it's very difficult. Some people just say they're just magical, and you just add them to drinks and make them better. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a full picture of what they are, if that helps.
Thank you.
Oh, great. So at this point, we should have some sort of sweetener, basically, like our simple syrup or whatever else that we have available, and bitters in our mixing glass. And then we're going to add our third ingredient, which is Aquavit. So old fashions, because there's so few ingredients, this is really going to be the last actual ingredient that we're adding besides ice. You use a fair amount. So I like to use about 2 ounces. I've seen people do 2.5 ounces or 3 ounces, which is a substantial amount of liquor. So I recommend doing 2. And then if for some reason after all this, you find maybe the drink is too sweet, or you just want to have a little bit more of that Aquavit flavor, feel free to just splash some more in there if you'd like. But that's the fun thing about drinks, is that for the most part, they can be fairly forgiving. And these are all the drinks that I give you tonight are going to be templates. These are things that you can, if you don't like the way that I made it, if it's too sweet, or in the case of the next drink, if it's too sour, that you can take away ingredients or the amounts of ingredients and make it your own. So have everything involved here. We've got basically sugar, bitters, and liquor. And that is the ingredients for an old fashioned in and of itself. But like every other cocktail, the most important ingredient to everything is ice and water. So I have these big fancy cubes. I'm not trying to show off. I just got them as a Christmas present and I love them very much. If you have smaller pieces of ice, the more ice you have, the colder your drink will be. If you only add a couple of cubes of ice, they're going to melt faster because they're going to have higher surface area, and alcohol on its own will not freeze. So it's going to keep melting your drink. And while we want a little bit of, you want your drink to be a little bit watered down, a little bit diluted, there's a point of balance. So that's why we tend to stir. I have my little cocktail spoon here, but if you have your finger, if you have a butter knife, a chopstick, and you can just kind of push it around the outside and spin the ice. I don't know if you can tell, you might be able to see a line where there's some condensation building up, and that's showing how cold my drink is getting. And that's what you want, because everyone wants a cold drink. And if you've ever had a warm drink that is mostly Aquavit, it's not that pleasant. So, in this case, I have a larger ice cube. I'm going to stir for a little bit longer, but you want to stir for about 20 seconds or so. Set that aside. And when you go out for drinks, most of your drinks that you order will have a significant portion of it be water. It's not that the bartender is trying to cheat you out of anything. It's that if you were making a margarita, and your bartender just gave you chilled tequila, lime juice, and agave syrup, you would say something is wrong with your drink. I am not a chemist. I couldn't tell you specifically how water interacts with alcohol, but it does open up quite a bit of the flavors. And it is an essential component to any drink, in my opinion. So I have my little strainer here. And again, if you don't have something like this, you could just cover it with your hand. Again, this is something at home. And then if you don't like covering it with your hand, then I can totally direct you where to buy things like this for your next cocktails. I'm just going to pour this directly over my ice here. And it's just in my drink this way. If you have more, if you can pour it over ice cubes, like more ice cubes, you can do that as well. You can just have a cold glass, and then you won't have your drink dilute anymore. You won't add any more water to it. So there's a lot of different options there. I realize that because there are so many options that might make it a little bit difficult for everyone involved. So if there's anyone that's having any difficulties or is feeling a little bit stuck with their current tools at hand, please, interrupt me and let me know. And if there isn't any issues at the moment, which I'm really happy and proud of you all in that sense. The last thing that bartenders do that isn't entirely
Doug, do you have a
for show.
question?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Are you supposed to put a orange slice in this one to be a old fashioned?
I love that question. It is actually a perfect segue to what I was getting to here. So there are a lot of, you've heard the term, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to make an old fashioned. So as I understand it, historically, the idea of having, a muddled orange, muddled cherry, all those things, sugar cubes, they were born out of the Prohibition era. This was a period of time, obviously, when liquor was not readily available, and the liquor that was available was not peak. It was not ideal. If it's underground and you can't have legal distilleries, the liquor that you're going to get is not going to be made by the people that have your best interests in mind. So you would have some whiskeys or just liquids in general that didn't taste very good. They're very harsh. And so adding in things like an orange or a cherry were there to help mask that flavor of a poorly made spirit. Now, that's not to say that you can't add an orange, because if you like an orange in your drink, I will absolutely encourage you to do so. I am not an elitist on that end, but the concept behind having this drink sort of having nothing else to hide behind is that we are, in this very specific case, I'm highlighting this Aquavit. I want you to be able to taste those flavors, and there is a little bit of a citrus note to this Stolflet Aquavit. So if you want to add an orange slice, or even squeeze a little bit of orange juice or a cherry or something like that, I absolutely encourage you to do that because it's delicious. In this case, I'm just not doing that as the standard, because also, that's another ingredient for everyone else involved to use if they don't want to buy an orange. But on the same subject of having an orange in there, I have these Meyer lemons here. If you have an orange at home or any other type of citrus that you're otherwise going to be using for the next drink, now's the time to take a little bit of a citrus peel off, just starting from sort of one tip and pulling all the way down. And what I'm going to do is just sort of take this end and squeeze it over my drink. And you might be able to tell just a little bit that there are these oils coming from the rind that are spraying over the drink. And then you can even just drop it directly in your glass like that as a little thing. You can throw it in the garbage, because mostly you just have those oils that you're then going to smell before you have the drink. So, I think having that olfactory sense, that smell is a huge addition to the overall experience. And if you have an orange wedge or an orange peel in there, that is amazing as well. And you can get creative with this. You can use cinnamon sticks as a garnish. If you have any star anise, those little like pretty star pods that are, you know, a essential ingredient in aquavit, that I sometimes like to toast those with a match and then put them in a drink, and you just get that sort of licoricey smell, which I really enjoy, but is not to everyone's liking. But once you've garnished the drink, it's ready to go. If you know, I'm sure you've all been very patient. So please go ahead and enjoy your drinks if you have one in front of you.
Looks pink.
Oh, yes, Joanne. Oh, sorry, you look like you're muted there.
Unmute. I'm curious, the drink you made is very pink. Is that just the color of the monitor, or is it have a color to it? I thought Aquavit was just plain.
So in this case, I try to compare them a little bit. So a lot of the color in this case is coming from the bitters as well. They're quite dark. Here, let me pour a little bit in a separate container for you. You know, just getting a little excited there, but so they add quite a bit of color. And in this case, you know, yeah, there are some aquavits that don't have this color that Stolflet has or Linny has, because originally aquavit was not meant to look that way. I heard someone mention Linny earlier, and you know, that is, they're known more like worldwide as an aquavit brand, more than most other ones, to my knowledge at least. And they became famous because they were originally an unaged aquavit. They were just clear, looked sort of more like a gin. And what happened was it's this great story that they tell, I believe it's even on the bottle, that they wanted to sell their aquavit internationally. They wanted to bring it to other cultures and see if they could sell their liquor. So they put it in barrels because that's how you would transport it at the time. And they put it on a ship and sailed down basically past the Horn of Africa, I believe. And they crossed the equator twice, essentially, in this journey. And they weren't very successful at selling aquavit. You know, the rest of the world didn't quite have the taste. They weren't really a huge fan. But when they returned to Norway and they took the aquavit out of the barrel, it had changed color. It had, you know, when you look at, say, bourbon or rye or any sort of whiskey, you know, it's all whiskey starts off as clear, and then they put it in a barrel and it gets to be, you know, this kind of color. So that time in the barrel, plus also being on a ship and riding with the waves and having different temperature changes, aged the aquavit really quickly. And that's how they decided they wanted to sell it from then on. And that's how Linny aquavit kind of became what it is today, which I think is just one of the coolest stories as far as like spirits and everything. I love that. So
Rosemary,
does anyone
you have a question there?
I just wanted to point out that we have here a genuine descendant of the man who started the Linja Aquavit.
Oh,
Listen,
wow. Did I tell the story correctly?
I'm the original.
Wow. Was that an accurate story that I told?
Yep.
Okay.
A ganska god, ja. Which means that was quite good and acted in where it came from.
Oh, good. That was very sneaky of you that you revealed yourself after I told the story.
But you know, sometimes when you get the right mixtures, everything, there's nothing better. I tell you, it's good. And
Good.
it's cold out there too, and it helps.
Yeah, it warms the soul. Oh yeah,
Oh,
Megan's
yeah?
showing off her bottle.
And I
Yeah.
have a piece of music from the old guy who, in a book here too about this.
Oh well.
Yeah. Well, hey,
That's great. So yeah, thank you and your ancestors then,
thank you very much. And
for
thank you
for the story.
doing a good job.
Good. Pressure's off. Yeah, and so on, a similar note, just to tie it into something local, is anyone familiar with Mischief Distillery? I believe it is sort of Ballard, Freelard, Fremont area. They're mostly known for their whiskeys, but they had done this limited edition rye whiskey, which if you're not familiar with rye whiskey, it's the easy term for it is that it's a whiskey made primarily with at least 51% of rye grain. That's pretty much all you really need to know at that point. And that rye gives a little bit of spice. So in many ways, it can be similar to an aquavit, but it's not infused with things like an aquavit is. But they had made this, they called it a storm-tossed rye, where they barreled their rye and they put it on a ship that was leaving Ballard. And it went across the equator several times and it came back and then they sold it. And I'd be lying to say that it was the greatest thing I've ever had. It was tasty, but I just loved that they tied in the culture of Ballard and added it to their own product and did something special and tried something new. I'm very excited and very enthusiastic when people try something new and something different, because it usually leads to something fun and weird, which is what I'm all about. Does anyone not like this drink? It's totally okay. There's that's part of the whole exploration of this. And does anyone like it? Is it something that's new for them?
I like it.
I have a blood orange bitters and that was pretty tasty.
Ooh, I like that. Yes. Blood orange everything is just fantastic. I'm a huge fan of that.
I went with cardamom bitters. It seemed very Norwegian to have something with cardamom. So
Yeah,
it seemed like a good idea. It was really good.
good. Excellent. I love the creativity. And yeah, that's the fun thing about bitters is if you can think of a flavor, there is probably a bitters for it. And you can make them yourself at home. If you buy some, I'm going to make this sound very simplistic, but if you buy some Everclear and you buy whatever it is that you want it to be flavored with, whether that, if you want orange, you can get a bunch of orange zest and put it in Everclear. If you want cardamom, you can definitely just add a bunch of cardamom pods to Everclear and then add a little bit of water to that to bring it down so it's not so strong. And it's just like a vanilla extract. It's something that you're just adding, so you can play around with that as something if you really like certain flavors. And you can then, if you like that flavor, you can add it to a gin and tonic. You can add it to just simple drinks that you might have on a regular basis to have at home, or just add it to soda water. If you're
Would you strain it? Would you put the stuff in it, strain it, and then?
yeah. So once you've if you're familiar with like limoncello, the Italian lemon liqueur, all it really is in many ways is vodka, lemon zest, just the peels, and sugar. And then they let the lemon sit in the vodka for a long period of time, and then they'll strain out the lemon zest, and then they'll add some sugar to it, depending on which limoncello you've had. Some of them are sweeter, some of them are less sweet. But that concept more or less remains the same. But if you use something like Everclear, which is much stronger than everything else that you would normally get on the market, the higher alcohol will extract more flavor from whatever it is that you're putting in there. So that's a great way to just make your own vanilla extract at home too, which I highly recommend. my girlfriend and I gave it out as Christmas gifts this year, which is, people love alcohol and baking things. So it's a perfect combination as a gift. So, I highly recommend just trying new things out. If we have time at home now these days, and it's so easy. If you have the ingredients, you just put them all into a jar together and let it sit. And, depending on what it is, you can let it sit for a week or months or even a full year if it's something like vanilla, where, there's no limit to how long that sits.
Especially if it's sitting in Everclear.
Especially if it's sitting in Everclear. So I know this is a fair amount of liquor to drink all at once, but how are we all doing on our beverages? Are we interested in making another round, or do we have someone else that is there to help us with it?
Yeah, I think moving on to a sour. Allison
I
has
see
stolen
Allison
my
back
drink.
there.
Yeah, she stole it. So I'm gonna need an Aquavit Sour.
Uh-oh. You like it, Allison?
It's pretty tasty.
Pretty tasty. Good. Excellent. I'll take
Rarely seen lodge member, Allison Mundy.
it.
I'm like a singing partner.
So we'll move on to the next drink. So Aquavit Sour. I probably could have come up with a better name for it, but I wanted to be a little bit more straightforward. So the idea of what a sour cocktail is something that really just has, your base alcohol, your base liquor, some sort of acid, which most cases that you'll have are lemons or limes, and some sort of sweetener. And then, and with a nice balance of that, really it just tastes like an adult lemonade or limeade, which is really what we all want to have these days, I think. So with that said, I wanted to do one thing just in advance before we start cutting into our citrus, because we'll have to cut these in half. Just like with the old fashioned that we just had, I want you to take another peel off of the citrus that you may or may not have with you. If you do, great. If you don't, we'll get creative for you. And I just wanted you to set this aside because, again, this will be a really nice little aromatic garnish to your drink. But since we're going to cut I'm going to cut this in half, I want to peel this off first. So very similar to the old fashioned in that we're going to start with our smallest and cheapest ingredients first. So everyone has sort of a similar sweetener. You can use really the same thing that you used from that old fashioned. And I mentioned on the flyer, it was like 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. If you have something that is just a simple syrup, if you've bought that or something along those lines, you're just going to use a little bit more of this in this recipe. So I'm going to use some maple syrup. Not to show off, I just really love maple syrup, and I think it's a little bit sweeter and has a little bit more flavor. So I'm going to add just a 1/2 ounce of this into my mixing glass. If you have a simple syrup, I would do 3/4 ounce. If you don't have the ability to measure, just try, if you're going to eyeball it, try to get an equal amount to how much citrus that you add, which could just be half of the amount of like a lemon that you have available.
Sorry, how much maple syrup?
In this case, with my maple syrup, I'm doing just a 1/2 ounce.
Got it.
Yeah. So I'm just cutting my citrus in half. There's no real wrong way to do it, but I like to kind of cut it, if you've got sort of the 2 navels on either side, just in the middle here. I find it just, you get more liquid from it that way. And then I have a citrus press. If you don't, you can totally just squeeze the lemon over your glass. You can even just mash it into the bottom of your glass and get some little liquid out that way. No real wrong way to do it here, but I'm just gonna do half of this. For those of you who want to be a little bit more scientific and measure things out, do 3/4 of an ounce. Or an equal amount to how much sugar you're adding into it. If we're just eyeballing on that end. So I don't have everyone on here. I just want to make sure that everyone's kind of caught up on this end. Okay. So if we're okay to proceed, it's only one more ingredient where I want to keep this, really straightforward and simple so that you can take this idea and make it at home and you can do different things with it if you like. So in this case, I'm going to add 1.5 ounces of aquavit. So I'm going to be drinking this next one up for no real particular reason. It's just kind of fancy, but when you think about having, the contrast of these two drinks, if you are drinking something with ice, your drink will stay colder for longer, but you're going to have more water introduced to your drink over time. Whereas something up, is going to stay the same. You're not going to have any water added to your drink. So it's going to be consistent for longer, but you're probably going to get it closer to room temperature if you let it sit. So my rule of thumb is if you're just planning on having a quick drink, if you're really just feeling a little thirsty and you want to have a margarita or something, I really recommend having it up because it's going to taste the same all the way and you're going to drink it fast enough that it's not going to get too warm. But something like a drink that takes a little bit of time, then it's fine to have it up on the rocks a little bit because it's just going to change a bit more over time, especially because it's stronger and it's mostly aquavit in this case. So if everyone has their sugar, lemon juice, and aquavit in their shaker, going to add ice. I'm also going to add a big cube, but again, same rules as before, as more ice is better. And because we are shaking, I just want to caution everyone so I don't get blamed. If you're going to shake, don't shake front to back towards your laptop. Make sure that if you have this set up this way, that you have if you have a 2-piece like this, or even if you just have a shaker that has a little cap on top, that you're facing away from your laptop, or even better, just this way, so that nothing gets here, because that would feel really bad if that happened.
Go, Megan. Wow.
And you can start to hear the ice break up in your shaker as you're shaking, and that, every time the ice breaks, it's chilling your glass a little bit more, adding a little bit more cold water to your drink. But now we've shaken it for a decent amount of time, there's no one right way to do it because all ice is different. You kind of have to just sort of feel it out. You want to strain it out because you've got all this broken ice in there and it's slowly diluting your drink. So I'm just going to pour it into my glass. And then sort of the same thing that I had with the old fashioned, you can just express a little bit of that oil if you have some citrus with you from that brine that I had you do earlier, and just put it over your glass. And it's going to have this just, really pleasant, citrusy, lemony sort of flavor that will pair really well with what you're about to drink.
That is very tasty.
Oh, good. And also, for any of you who feels like, some people have, everyone has different palates. So if this is too sweet for you, there's another trick that you can always do that I really enjoy, where, I'm going to pour a little bit of bitters into this little mixing glass here. And I'm just going to pour it into my drink. You don't have to do this. It's more, again, for someone who feels like it's not, it's not balanced enough. It might be too sweet for them. But what happens is you get a nice little line on top because you have a thicker viscosity of your drink, and then you have the thinner bitters. And what they will do is add this nice sort of astringency. It's something that will cut through sweetness and make the drink, if it's too sweet for you, then that spice will help balance it for you. If you like it as it is, then you don't have to mess with it at all, and you'll enjoy your drink. And I'm really happy you do. So,
Thumbs up here. That was another good one.
oh, good.
Tastes like limeade, like boozy limeade.
Right? And that's really what we all want, I think, to some degree,
I think it is what we want.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous, very horrifically dangerous.
Clayton, did you put the bitters over the top of yours?
I did not. We had already started drinking it.
Too late.
Too late.
You'll have to try it again. And so the fun part about this drink is that just like the old fashioned, where if you take the bare bones of that drink, where it's, in this case, it was aquavit, sugar, bitters, and then, water really added in there. You could, with that, you could sub in bourbon, you could sub in gin, you could sub in brandy or anything else really into that instead of the aquavit, and use those same amounts and make a really tasty drink. And in this case, it's the same idea. If you taste it, does it remind you of anything that you might have had before, such as a margarita? And the name sour, is referencing, like a whiskey sour. You could also do the same thing with vodka, and it would be a lemon drop. If you were to do gin and lime juice, more or less, that is known as a gimlet, which is a classic British sailor's drink. So it's meant to be a template for all of you to kind of work with and learn from, so that you can make more drinks like this at home. But I also recognize that, this was one class, and I got you to taste 2 drinks, and, you might not be experts yet. You're getting there. But feel free to reach out to me on social media. I can put in my Instagram into the chat there. And so, I'm an open book, and I'm also, I'm not in bars right now because it's not safe. So I have plenty of time on my hands. So feel free to just ask me any questions. If you're just like, Ben, I've got this, this, and this, and I need to make a drink, I got you. I can help you, and we'll have a great time with it. So just don't be a stranger.
I love the idea of the maple syrup, because I always have maple syrup on hand, and I love it.
Yeah, it is a really unsung hero. And, for those who care about that sort of thing, it's also the most environmentally friendly sweetener you can really have, because this, it's from trees that just continue growing. So you can get some really, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, there are some amazing maple syrups out there that will make some amazing cocktails.
Joanne, do you have a question?
Yeah, where do you usually work? Where do you usually bartend in Seattle?
Well, so like Megan mentioned, I used to work at Pioneer Square D&E. So it was a restaurant in Pioneer Square. And then most recently I'd been working just for a few short months before the pandemic at a location called Connect Lounge. And that is in Belltown. But I also do more of these classes and these styles of classes with a partner of mine called Green Fire Products. And we can put more links in that to everyone involved as well, where I can I send you out an entire cocktail kit. Essentially, I'll give you the garnishes, give you the citrus or whatever mixers are involved. Legally, I cannot send you alcohol, unfortunately. I would really love to be able to do that. But I send you everything involved, and then you can mix cocktails with those ingredients. And I walk you through it step by step, and we can, customize it to make drinks for yourselves or others, or, if you want to make it a celebration for someone, because, while Zoom meetings aren't the funnest medium, they are one of the few that we have. And I feel like being able to see each other this way and be able to drink together in this way is fun and is enjoyable, and just being able to make it a little bit more unique. So that is the best way to sit at my bar these days, I would say.
I hope that when we once again can meet in person, that perhaps you would come to the lodge and maybe do this again for our membership.
Absolutely, I would love that. Yeah, this was really fun, and you've all been great sports. I know it's not easy following bartending instructions over camera, and we might not have all had all the ingredients or things, but I really appreciate it, and this has been really enjoyable for me. Hopefully,
You
it
could
has
bring
been for
your
you as well.
kits too. That'd be great.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
could get the kits, know that we would have them there when we got there, buy them from you. So that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, just keep it all
Actually, we
self-contained.
should all have.
Awesome.
a
Thank
drink
you
we can look forward
so much, Ben, for coming and helping us with this. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well done. That was great.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And
Goal.
now you're properly lubricated for your meeting.
Cool.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you again, Ben. That was really, really fun. We've been trying to get back into having some fun events after we were struggling the first few months of Zoom life, figuring out how to get people together and what to do. And we've been trying to come up with things, and this was perfect. So I might have some people falling asleep during the business meeting, but I can live with that.
I didn't get the ingredients because I've just been swamped at work, but it was fun to just sit and watch and listen. And now I'm inspired. I'm going to go out and get everything.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say. Yeah. And Seth, you can absolutely blame me if people fall asleep.
Okay, it happens every month, but I'll blame you this time.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, if you want to put your Instagram or anything in the chat, that'd be great, and we'll make sure that he has that, and we can check you out, and you'll start getting questions from us, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we hope you'll be back in a bar in Seattle sometime soon, and we'll come visit you there too.
Yeah, hopefully sometime soon. I'll figure it out one way or another.
Yep. Great. Instagram.
All right, Seth, I think if you want to.
Yeah. Thank you again, Ben. Everybody, he did put his Instagram in the chat. And if you're having trouble with the chat, we'll get that out to you. But thank you again, Ben. Thank you, Megan and Joanne, for getting this set up. And we'll let Ben go and enjoy his night. We'll take just a minute break, and then we'll get started with the business meeting. But thank you again, Ben. Have a great night, and we'll see you at the lodge.
Thank you all as well. Take care.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
I think it would be a fun thing